when you're writing Frozen, and the same thing applies to Hatchet II, in the writing process, do you ever consider, man, maybe I shouldn't write this because how the heck am I going to be able to do it?
Well, Frozen it was like its own different beast. And I mean, what I've sort of tried to do with my work is always do something completely different, which is part of the fun of it. Like, you can't even compare something like Frozen to Hatchet or Hatchet 2 or even Spiral. I mean, they're very, very different movies.
Right.
But with Frozen, when I came up with the idea, that was what was most exciting. It was such a challenge because I would tell the guys at Aeroscope what the idea is, and they're like, dude, it's great. It'll be a good short. I'm like, no, there's a whole movie here, man. And they're like, how? What are you going to do? You got 3 people in a chair. Like, what are you going to do? And that's been the joy of the movie, is a lot of people think that when they go to see it. They're like, how are they going to pull this off? And Buried is another great example. I don't know if you've seen that yet. I was actually really pissed because I met Rodrigo Cortez when we screened together at Sundance, and he's like, "Oh, you're the movie with 3 people in a chair." I'm like, "Yep," and he's like, "I got a guy in a box." I was like, "Fuck you, man." Yeah, it goes back to for me, one of my biggest influences is Hitchcock, and Lifeboat is just amazing. You got a bunch of people on a boat, and that's it. Right. Yet he still was able to keep the tension up, and that's all in character and dialogue and writing. And I think with Frozen, the fact that these are 3 very real people, and it's a very open book, I think, to my own life. All the stories they tell, everything that happens is all true stories from my own life. I think that's what endears people to them, and they act like real people would act. There was never somebody on that chair who suddenly was like a gymnast and knew how to do something, or was, oh, I know, I'm a doctor and I know about frostbite. Nobody wants to see that movie. So I was really excited that it worked and that it's been affecting people the way it has.
Yeah. So when you sit down to write Hatchet 2, I mean, the first one really popular with fans, and when you write it, do you feel kind of a responsibility to those fans?
Definitely. The first Hatchet was very much a selfish movie where I got a group of my friends together and we made the type of movie that we wanted to see again, even though everybody was telling us, dude, that's so out of style. Nobody does that anymore, and like blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden there's like literally an army worldwide of Victor Crowley fans, and this time we were working for them. And that was very different because normally I like to do independent movies, and I kind of have skirted the studio system up until recently because I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. But this time the fans were kind of our boss. And as cliche as it sounds, everybody on the crew, because the exact same crew came back to do the second one, which I don't think has ever happened before in a slasher movie. But they were always thinking, well, what do the fans want? What do the fans want? And something that made it easier was that we had set up the sequel before we made the first one. So we already knew everything that was going to happen in this one. And even some of Victor Crowley's weapons that he uses in this one, if you go back and watch the first one, you can see them in the shed, like in various places. Like, we really, really, really had this planned out. So the tough thing, though, to be completely honest, was when you have a movie, when you're shooting Hatchet 2 and at the same time you have a movie in Sundance that people are fainting at and throwing up on themselves in the audience, and the New York Times and Gene Shalit and Ebert and Roper are all going nuts over it while you're making Hatchet 2, there's a little bit of you got to check your ego at the door a little bit and be like, guys, this is not Frozen, like, this is Hatchet 2, and we made the movie that is what people who like the first one want. And it's even like the lighting. There were actually times, not that we tried to light it worse or something, but Will and I would get something going, and I'm like, dude, this doesn't feel like the first movie at all anymore, and we would change it and try to make it feel like the first movie did. And I think, and so far, based on the reactions, we did a good job with that, because people really feel like it almost feels like you put down a book, because the way the other one ended, it was just this abrupt cut to black. And then this one starts on the same frame that one ended on, and you're right back in it, and it feels like the same movie, but it's just better. We had more time, we had more things to play with. The kills are better. There's more kills, and there's way more of a story in this one than there was in the first one. So I think we did a good job, and it's always going to come down to preference, especially with horror, because there's the fanatics that are like, nah, man, the original. And I never understand that. Like with Friday the 13th, for instance, people are like, nah, the original. Who ever watches the first one? Nobody. The Jason's not even in it. It's like you're sitting around with your friends. You're not going to be like, let's watch the first one. Nobody watches the first one. So I really think that this is better than the first one, and we all do. Like the cast, everybody, we were very, very excited about it.
Well, you've created, when I think of the great horror villains, there's obviously Jason and Freddy, and there's kind of a limited library of them, the really memorable ones. And in Victor Crowley,
how sad is that? Like, where did the villains go? All of a sudden, like, we hit the 90s in horror, which, like, the basis of horror is a villain. It's a bad guy. It's like a monster, something, and it all went away, and that's why I did this.
And I mean,
now, what do we have? We have Jigsaw.
Well, that's this 21st century, but I hate Jigsaw. No offense.
I have a real big place in my heart for Saw, for the first one especially, and I feel like it was unrightfully put in the torture porn thing, the original Saw, because it was more of a mystery and it wasn't very violent, but people think they remember it being this visceral thing, and I think James Wan is just incredible. But there's no more villains. We have like Jigsaw and we have Victor Crowley. Like Jigsaw gets 3,000 screens and $50 million in marketing every time he comes out. I get fucking 60 screens, the ratings board coming after me, and nothing. But
well, I want to talk to you about the rating of the film, but on the line of the horror villain, what when you conceive this character, what went into making it memorable?
I think every great villain is all based in the villain's mythology. And you have to have a campfire story, and it's really that simple. If you have somebody who's just killing people for no reason, it doesn't really make sense, and that doesn't become a memorable villain. Now, a movie that I love is High Tension, and I think, the ending, whatever, but the movie is fantastic. However, you would never really want a High Tension 2 or 3 because who really cares about that guy? Like, why is that guy doing it? What's going on? Very effective movie, and I like it a lot. But if you can have a story that even an 8-year-old can sit and tell to their friends very quickly, like Freddy Krueger, for instance. Here's a guy, he was a child killer, the parents burned him alive, and now he's back killing them in their dreams. Done. It's so simple. And Victor Crowley's the same way. He was killed by mistake, and now he haunts this area, and you can hear him screaming for his father in the woods. And if you let yourself go there, it is kind of frightening. And with Hatchet especially, I think one of the things that we're very conscious of is because the tone of the movies is to be fun and have fun and be funny, we also keep that out of Victor Crowley. So there's nothing funny about Victor Crowley. You're never going to see him making jokes or something funny with him in it. If he's there, he's fucking going to kill you. But that was really the fun of this. And then to see the response, this was an independent movie made with nothing and championed by just diehard fans, and now you go and do conventions and the autograph line's like 3 hours long, and the people that come through with Victor Crowley tattooed on them and the Hatchet Army tattoos, and how it's affected people, especially a lot of there's a good portion of horror fans that are I'm trying to think of the PC word to say it, but there's people that are like deformed, burn victims, people who just live a life that a lot of other people could never relate to or understand. And that's one of the most touching things, I think. At Comic-Con, I was signing for Frozen, but all these Hatchet fans came through. And there was one guy, he looked a lot like Rocky Dennis from Mask. Like really, really deformed. And his mom brought him there, and he'd driven 7 hours to come, and he only wanted to hold my hand and say thank you, and it was just like it's emotionally overwhelming to know that this person who probably doesn't get that much joy in their life can really relate to this character, not because he wants to kill people or anything like that, but they sympathize with him. And I think that's the other thing. I think Jason had that. I think even Michael Myers to some extent has that. There's a shred of sympathy for them, and I think that works.
Well, you're really kind of pushing the boundaries with this, with Hatchet II. Was that a goal for you? I mean, when you started putting this together, you had to have known you were going to get major resistance from the MPAA. You must have been prepared for that fight.
Well, after what I went through the first time, which I'm still not over, like it sounds pathetic, but I still have like nightmares about it. I mean, that was the worst. So, people ask you, what was the worst day of your life? And some people have to think, like, my trial against the MPAA was, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. They had the wrong guy. They were under resistance because of the torture porn and people complaining about where horror was going, and I was the easy target because I had no money to defend myself with, and I was the poor blue-collar kid from Boston, and, like, they could get me. And so they went after Hatchet like I've never seen before. And they were calling me a despicable person and all these, I mean, I just was like, dude, you have the wrong guy. And it was, to go back to my roots of loving Twisted Sister, it was the same thing that Dee Snider went through in the 80s when the PRC went after him. He was not the problem. He didn't even swear. He didn't drink. He didn't do drugs. His songs were about, like, yes, you can and don't give up. And they went after him, and he was the fall guy. And I kind of feel like the same thing happened to me. So this time around, there was a lot of anger that came into this. And I think that's one of the reasons why these kills are even more brutal than the other ones, because there was just a lot it was a very cathartic thing, and for all of us, for Kane, for myself, we were very angry when we were making this movie, so when he fucks people up, it's like, whatever you saw in the first one, this is like way better.
That's good.
And
really
so we
good.
harnessed it in a positive way, and we did it, but I mean, I knew there was no way that this movie was going to just skate by. So I wanted it to go straight to video, and so did the crew and the cast. We all knew it was going straight to video, and we didn't care. This is a movie that we're making for the fans. It's not going to further my career. Most people are going to call it a step back because it's a sequel, and, oh, but Frozen was so good, and now why is he doing a slasher movie again? But I love it, and I want to do it. And then Dark Sky, who did one of these rare things that you never see in this business, where most people will tell you anything to get you to sign the contract and just do the movie for them, and then they steamroll over you. But with them, they knew how I felt about it, and they said, look, we're going to show it to the ratings board. Let's just see what happens. Maybe we'll get an R because we'd love to go theatrical with this. And I said, fine. So they showed it to the ratings board, and they got an NC-17. So they said, can you try to cut some stuff out? I cut out almost 2 minutes of gore, not 2 minutes of establishing shots or character development, gore. And they still gave me an NC-17. So I was like, dude, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like, the whole movie's going to be castrated, just like the first one was when it came out. And I don't want to deal with it. It's not worth it. If you guys are going to put it on 3,000 screens and spend $50 million in marketing like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, fine. But you're not going to do that. And so let's just be honest here.
Right.
And then they started showing it to the theater chains, and then lo and behold, struck a deal, and this new AMC independent thing was being started, and all of a sudden they called and they're like, we're going to go unrated. And I mean, this hasn't happened in a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
It's huge. And the hard thing is, though, is the fucking horror fans, like, they better show up for this. I mean, I'm literally, my head is on the chopping block right now. I mean, I'm a marked man by the ratings board. I might never be able to make another movie because of this, because people are going to be afraid to hire me, because no studio wants to deal with the ratings board. So if they know that the ratings board is out to get you, they're not going to hire you. So I'm very nervous about that. But if we do a high per screen average, if the fans actually turn up and support this, even if it's not playing near them, if they'll just buy a friggin' ticket because you know they're going to fucking steal it from me and download it anyway, there's no reason not to just buy a matinee ticket for this movie and let your voice be heard, because you're not going to see Hatchet in the top 10 at the box office. We're not going to make like $1 million theatrically. It just doesn't happen with a movie when you're only on 60 screens. But if that per screen average is high, other people are going to start releasing movies like this. They're not going to be so afraid of the ratings board anymore, and the winds of change will start blowing. So I really hope they turn up, but I've been let down by the fans so many times for all the crying about remakes and complaining.
Yeah.
That's all they go to see.
Still. Yeah.
But your movies, I mean, they thrive on word of mouth. I mean, the first Hatchet thrived on word of mouth, and we think you're one of the great new voices in the genre.
Yeah.
And so we're here to support you 100%. But I had one more question about the MPAA before I let you go, because I know you're pressed for time. do you stand in front of some kind of committee or something to argue your case? I mean, who the hell are these people?
There's a documentary called "This Film Has Not Yet Been Rated" by Kirby Dick. That is exactly what it is. You're not supposed to know who they are. They don't tell you what their names are. It's completely a sham. And even when you drop off the DVD for them to see, you put it through a slat in a door, and like two eyes look back, and they don't want anybody to know who they are. And when I went to trial and I said I will not accept this NC-17 rating, it was me against Joan Graves, who was the head of the ratings board at the time. I think she might be gone now. I don't know. I'm just hoping she's dead. And then they bring in 12...
I love you, Adam. You're great.
Sorry. They're bringing in 12 industry representatives. They're supposed to be theater owners and operators, directors, and studio execs. Now, I've worked for every studio at this point. I know everybody in the business. I didn't know one of these people that they brought in, and one of them was in a walker. He was so elderly he couldn't even climb into his seat. And I'm like, are you serious? And the woman gets up and she says, the following movie is called Hatchet. And the whole room goes, ugh. And I'm like, oh, man. So they show the movie, and there's points in that movie that I know are funny. I don't care who you are. There's a couple points in there that everybody laughs at. And lines will go by, and nobody's laughing, and I'm in the back of the room going, come on! I was so mad. That's how it goes. And you can't win against them, though, and that's why, I don't want to fight with them. I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it is. It's just they didn't want to help this movie. We went around them. I found a way. It's a huge victory after what I went through last time. But it's not going to really be a win unless the fans get my back right now, because if the fans show up, because the ratings board is terrified about this right now. They're threatening the theaters that are putting it out. They're like, you're not being a team player here. You're not supposed to do this. But something big is in the air, and it's about to happen, and it's all in the hands of the fans, and I wish I trusted them more. I wish I could believe in them more, but I just can't, because we hate remakes, and then all they do is go and see remakes. Mm-hmm. Where the fuck were the fans to drag me to hell? It's ridiculous.
Or Splice. They dropped that one, or they just let that one die too. It's ridiculous. I appreciate your honesty, Adam. I've always appreciated that on our show. I really appreciate how honest you are.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm just a dude making movies, and I'm very lucky to be doing it. And I'm not a leader. I'm not some artist. I'm just a dude who makes movies, and I'm always going to tell it like it is, even though it keeps getting me in trouble. So I just really can shut my mouth. The publicist is looking at me right now like, stop it.
Well, we love your movies, man, and we're rooting for you, and we'll be there opening day, October 1st.
Thank you very much. Try to bring 8,000 people with you if you can. It would be awesome.
We'll threaten their homes and your families and everything.
We'll kidnap people from their homes and Thank you, buddy.
Drag them away from the message board where they're writing worst movie ever on whatever remake it is, and have them go see this. And even if they can go on the message board and say worst movie ever for this one. I don't care. Just go. Just see it, and hopefully they'll have a good time.